Hello, welcome to Integrated Science Intervention Program for Senior High Schools. Today, our topic will be variation and inheritance, and the lesson title is Terminologies in Genetics. I am your facilitator, Gilbert Odei Into. Now, for a starter, let's look at the two persons on the screen. State two similarities and two differences between the two persons. You have just 10 seconds to do so. You may have some answers as well as myself. Now let's see the answers. For similarities, they are both males. They are also wearing yellow t-shirts and brown pair of trousers. For some differences, one of them is fat and the other is slim. And again, one is tall and the other is short. You may have so many differences and similarities between them. Apart from the dresses they are wearing, today we are going to dwell on how they got their natural characters from their parents. Our lesson outcome for today are: we will learn to list some terminologies in genetics and also explain the terminologies in relation to genetics. For our lesson outline, we'll be looking at genetic terminologies and also explain the genetic terminologies we looked at. Now let's look at some key words that will feature in the lesson. We have genetics, chromosome, gene, alleles. Check the pronunciation well, alleles. Genotype, phenotype, heterozygous, homozygous, dominant and recessive genes. Now let's start our lesson. What is meant by the term genetics? Yes, your guess is as good as mine. Genetics is the branch of science that deals with the study of heredity and variation in organisms. By that, we mean a person who studies genetics will concentrate on heredity in organisms. Per heredity, we mean the transfer of characters from parents to their young ones. Now let's look at the two persons on your screen. They are both albinos. One is the mother and the other is the son. The mother, being an albino, transferred the albinism to the son during birth. That is inheritance. When we come to our homes, we may look like our parents. Some of you are tall, some of you are short. All those characters were transferred from our parents to us, and that is what is meant by heredity. Now for variation, variation refers to the differences in characters among organisms of the same species. The same species here means organisms of the same kind. You may have heard species from your Form 1 lessons, where it refers to organisms that looks alike and hence can interbreed to produce young ones of their own kind. So as human beings, we are of the same species. So differences among us refers to variation. Now let's look at the three persons on our screen. They are all human beings, but they have differences in characters. One of these characters is the hair color. Some of them have brown hair and others have black. Again, when we look at their sexes, 2 of them are males and 1 is a female. When we look at the shape of their faces, they are different, but they are all human beings. This is what is meant by the term variation. Now let's go to some of the terminologies. The first terminology we'll look at is chromosomes. What is a chromosome, or what are chromosomes? They are thread-like structures which are found in the nucleus of a cell. So here, every cell contains thread-like structures which are known as chromosomes. These chromosomes contain the genetic material DNA and proteins. Now let's look at this picture. You may see some circular object there that represents a cell. And in that cell, we see another circle there which represents the nucleus. In the nucleus, we have the genetic material chromosome. And the chromosome magnified out, we see a pair of structures there. And from one of the pairs, we see a thread-like structure which is known as the DNA. This DNA is wound around another circular object, which is the protein. You may have heard about DNA in the news, in your daily talks. Sometimes there are quarrels on paternity of children, and DNA tests could prove whether the man is really the father of the children or not. By that, they go to the hospital, pick samples from them. It can just be the saliva, it can be hair, it can be a skin sample where they match the DNA of those 2 cells to confirm whether the man is the father or not. The next term is gene. Okay. Now let's look at what a gene is. This is the basic unit of inheritance on a chromosome. And this is for a particular character. So on the chromosomes, we have genes, which are the unit of inheritance of a particular character on that. For example, I am a tall person, and on my chromosome, there is a unit there which accounts for the tallness, and that is what is known as the gene. The next term is alleles. Alleles are the alternate forms of a gene that occupy the same relative position on similar chromosomes and controls same character. By that, let's look at this on your screen. We have 2 rod-like structures which represent a pair of chromosomes. These chromosomes are similar and hence are known as homologous chromosomes. Homologs are similar structures. So in the cell, we have homologous chromosomes, one from father, one from the mother. On them, you will see some red strips. When considering only one of the strips, we call it the gene because it controls just a character, and which is a unit. When considering the two are known as alleles because the 2 are occupying the same relative positions and they control the same character, which in the case of tallness and shortness, height. So the pair will be called alleles for height, but one of them is a gene for height. Now let's go to the next term, which is genotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism. That is the gene within an organism that controls its external features. The next is phenotype. Phenotype refers to the physical appearance or the physical characteristics of an organism. And this physical appearance or characteristics of an organism is always controlled by the genotype, which is the genetic makeup of the organism and the organism's environment. For example, we have height. Height is controlled by a gene as well as the environment. You receive a gene for shortness or tallness, but if you are not fed well, which is the environmental, you will not achieve that height that you should get. Again, we have skin color. A person born to be dark may bleach to become fair. That skin color is controlled by both the genotype as well as the environment. The person genotypically is supposed to be dark, but due to bleaching, which is environmental, becomes fair. Another is behavior. We inherit behaviors from our parents, but the environment in which we find ourselves can shape the behavior. It can become a good behavior or bad behavior if you are among bad friends. The next is the eye color. We inherit eye colors from our parents. For example, most of we blacks have brown eyes because our parents have brown eyes. You may have seen some people with green eyes, blue eyes, and even pink eyes, which are all inherited from parents. But this can also be due to the environment in which we find ourselves. Now we move on to the next terminology, which is homozygous. This occurs when alleles at a particular location on a chromosome are identical or the same for a particular character. We have mentioned alleles already, and we saw that they are alternate forms of a gene that occupies the same relative positions on same chromosomes and controls same characters. If these alleles are identical or the same for a particular character, we say it is homozygous. For example, let's see these two blue strips we see on our screen. It represents the chromosomes, which are identical or which are homologs. On them, you see black strips. The black strips represent the genes. And since they are occupying the same relative positions, they are alleles. These alleles controls the same character. And this character they control may be tallness, it may be shortness, but once it is homozygous, it means it's identical, so there is no mixture of other heights there. The next is heterozygous. This occurs when alleles at a particular location on the chromosome are non-identical or different for a particular character. You see, it contrasts the first one, which is homozygous. In biology, when we say homo, it means same. So when the genes are the same for the character, it is homozygous. Hetero means different. So when the genes are different for a particular character, we call it heterozygous. For example, let's come back to our strips. Now we can see that one of the strips have white there. The white we see there is labeled small a, which means it is a different gene. Right. Different gene here means though they control the same character, which is height, this is for shortness. So the person will appear tall, but within the chromosomes, we have a shortness gene there. So when a pair of alleles occupying the same relative position are non-identical or different for that particular character, we say heterozygous has occurred. Now let's come to the next term, which is dominant character or dominant gene. This is the character or the gene that shows itself physically in presence of other genes. Though it is there with other genes, they show themselves physically whilst the other genes hide. And that is the reason why it is called a dominant gene. This in genetic diagrams are represented by capital letter. Now let's look at what we have there again. We have our blue chromosomes. On them we have a black strip and a white strip. The black having capital, the white having small, showing that the black is dominant over the white. So again, if we are coming to the height, and the black represents tallness and the white represents shortness. Though the shortness is hiding in the person, the black, which is tallness, will show. So physically, that person will be tall. Now let's look at our beautiful family on the screen. One of them, which is the man, is black and the woman is white or has fair skin. They have twins. One of the twins, if you look closely, has dark skin and one has fair skin. That means the one that has dark skin is dominant to the father's color, and the one that has fair skin is dominant to the mother's color. Now, our next terminology is recessive character or gene. This is the character or a gene that does not show itself physically in presence of a dominant gene. So this one, if a dominant gene is there, then it will not show itself, though that particular character is there. Sometimes in your families, you may see that some of them look like your father, whilst others look like your mother. Those who look like your father are dominant to your father and recessive to mommy, whilst those who look like mommy are dominant to mommy's characters and recessive to daddy's characters. These characters only show themselves when they are homozygous. That is, when they become double in a person, then it will become dominant and hence show itself. It is represented by small letter. Now again, let's come to our blue chromosomes. On them again, we have the black strip and the white strip, where the black represents tallness and the white represents shortness. In this case, the tallness shows, but the shortness will not show. Hence, the shortness, which is the white, is recessive, though it is present. Again, in the family, the black man and the fair woman gave birth to the twins. One of the twins, who is black, is recessive to the fair skin color, and the one who is fair is recessive to the black skin color. Now let's go to the next. The next is again the blue strips, where we have the white and white on them. The white, being recessive, has now become homozygous. That is, has become identical. Hence, it will show. That is the reason why a couple who are albinos can give birth to a child that has a normal skin, or a couple who are tall can give birth to a child who is short. Now, the next is codominance. Co here means they go together. And this occurs when both alleles on the chromosome in a heterozygous condition show themselves physically. So though we have a black strip and a white strip, they both show themselves physically, although one is recessive. Now let's look at this family. This family, one of them is white and one of them is black. but they have a child whose skin color is a mixture of the two. What we'll call half caste in this area of the world. So half caste skin comes about as a result of mixture of a dominant gene, which may be black or white, and a recessive gene, which may also be black or white, but mixing and showing in the child as in between the two. Now let's see what we've learned today. We've learned about some terminologies in genetics, their definitions, and how they apply in genetics. For our assignment, let's define the following terms as applied in genetics. 1. Chromosome. 2. Genotype. 3. Phenotype. And 4. Alleles. Don't leave them hanging. Solve them. In our next lesson, we'll talk about them. Thank you for your attention.